and welcome. This is the first in what I hope will be a really interesting and diverse podcast called Audiovisual Cultures. My name is Paula Blair and I'm the creator and host. I am a scholar of film and visual culture primarily, and I have many wide-ranging interests. I'm originally from Belfast in Northern Ireland, so that explains the funny accent, which is possibly a little bit anglicised. Because I've been living in England for a few years now, and I've lived in Scotland for a little bit as well. But the Belfast accent is non-negotiable and it won't be changing. So really, the plan for this is really just an introductory ramble, I suppose, to give you a sense of what I'm trying to build. I'm an academic and I have left academic teaching. I had a spell of ill health, but also it was kind of the kick in the arse that I needed to have a go at other things, because I was post-PhD. I basically did the early career researcher thing, and I jobbed around all over the UK, taking temporary posts here, there and everywhere else, and going through sort of bouts of outright poverty at times and facing homelessness and things like that, because you don't really get paid for summers and you're kind of left on a limb. And really I was living hand to mouth quite a lot of the time. Even though I've done a funded PhD, there's still a lot of economic difficulties around finishing the PhD. And also I'm from a working class family. I'm not from wealth of any kind, and the sort of 3 years I had PhD funding were the most stable I'd ever had in my life at that point. But anyway, that's sort of a bit of personal stuff about me. I had a really hard road in academia, I think, and it was something I felt very passionate about, was trying to become an academic, trying to make a difference. And I felt more and more like I was railing against a system that was designed to make people like me fail. And I'm tired of feeling like a failure, even though I've achieved a lot in my life, because given my background, my economic background, my social background, all these kinds of things, I'm not the typical sort of person who would normally get a PhD, never mind do any kind of postgrad study. And certainly I'm the first, as far as I'm aware, of my family to have, I'm the first generation, certainly on one side of my family, that's ever gone to university, and I'm the first, as far as I know, that's ever done postgrad studies of any kind. So to become a doctor by 27, and I did my PhD viva the day after my 27th birthday, that's pretty cool. And I mean, I have to bear, I am going to say at the outset, I think it was far too young to do a PhD. I don't necessarily recommend doing one at all, never mind in your 20s, not in your early 20s anyway. But anyway, this is sort of a bit of a ramble, and it's a bit more personal than I intended. Normally I script what I do, but I thought I'd really just shoot the breeze, because I want you to see that I'm a person doing this. I'm a person with a life and with emotions and with health issues and stuff, but I'm really passionate about education, about lifelong learning, about critical thinking, and about every human being the best possible human and the best possible version of themselves that they can be. I think media literacy of any kind is incredibly prescient at the moment, and I'm saying this on the 31st of January 2018, and there's an awful lot of things going on in the world that I could be referring to about that, but I want to try and keep things as neutral as possible. What I'm trying to do now, that I'm kind of out of academia, but I am still a scholar. First and foremost, I am a scholar, I am a researcher, I am a writer. Those are the things I have always wanted to be. I love knowledge, I love learning new things, I love finding stuff out, I love making connections and finding new ways of understanding things, and I really love helping other people get there as well. So I still want to be part of everything, even though I'm not involved in teaching directly anymore. I started a YouTube channel a while ago because I have a bank of teaching materials and research materials in presentation form from many years years of doing all of this, and it's sitting stowed away in a computer, not being useful to anybody. So I thought I'll take it out of the computer and I'll make it useful for some people, hopefully. And also it's just a way of building up a profile and keeping in the game in a way, because I'm not done yet. And I feel like I've got work to do in this world, and I feel like I feel a bit overwhelmed, because I think a lot of the change I would like to see in the world is beyond my reach and capability. So I will do the little bits that I feel that I can. I think helping people engage with culture and engage with the systems in the world that are bigger than us, but trying to negotiate with them in a way that we can live our lives and try to be okay with ourselves. I think that's the best any of us can really do at the moment. So that's sort of what I'm trying to do. And hopefully if any of you out there are finding these recordings and you're studying some form of film studies or humanities subjects in general that might be transferable, hopefully some of this is of use to you and will help you be a better scholar. And I hope certainly it'll make me a better scholar just sitting thinking about these things, because I always found that teaching made me a better researcher, and that's really the one thing I miss about teaching. Feeling energy from students and getting a question from a student that blindsides you is the best thing ever. It keeps us on our toes and it makes us learn, and I miss those things. I miss the exchanges with students who are thinking about stuff and finding stuff out and giving you new information, because that's what it should be all about. Is, you know, we are still in the evolution of our race, and it should be about finding new knowledge and exchanging that, and I believe very firmly in those things. I think there are some areas in academia, certainly in the UK at the moment, with ref cycles and the funding systems that are in place. I find that the things that are privileged are not knowledge and are not learning, and it isn't for, I think the reasons for finding stuff out and the things that are privileged aren't necessarily going to help the human race develop any further. In fact, it just all seems like a capitalist venture, but these are arguments that are much bigger than me and are now sort of fueling a system that I'm decided to step out of. So maybe I don't have that much of a right to have a say anymore, but it worries me what it does to people, and certainly the state of a lot of people's mental health because of these systems, where you're not allowed to just be good at something anymore. You have to be the best, and if you're not the best, and if you're not winning all these grants, and if you're not publishing in all the top journals that are also open access, and if you're not publishing like 3 monographs every 2 months, then you're basically worthless in these systems, and that's extremely wrong. And I think that there has to be resistance, there has to be a revolution, and I tried my best to start one while I was in it, but it just wrecked me because I was out on my own. Anyway, so what I'm trying to do is, I think I visited good friends in Aberdeen, where I used to live. My first ever full-time fixed-term teaching post was in the University of Aberdeen, and I made the most amazing friends when I was there, and these are people who are still extremely dear to me. And I hope that if we continue with this podcast, I hope that they'll be my guests at some point, so that you can hear all about their amazing work. My good friend Fiona Noble, who is a scholar of Hispanic studies and film and visual culture, the last time we met up face to face, you know, she made the very good point that it's really audio-visual studies that we do. Visual culture excludes the audio part of what we do, and she's absolutely right. And I'd been thinking about this myself, but hadn't really articulated it in as clear a way as she had to that point. So in a way, I've slightly nicked the term. I mean, it's not exclusive to anybody anyway, but I've kind of, you know, sort of taken that term, and I thought, well, that would be a good umbrella heading for a wider, more inclusive vision of studying the kinds of cultural outputs that we work on. Because cinema is changing very much. You know, I had a very traditional, you know, film studies education as an undergrad and as a master's student. And then in my PhD, I branched out and I looked more at visual art, and I looked at a lot of convergences between film and what was happening in art galleries. So I was looking at moving image production more broadly, but even at that, I was still edging out into sculpture, into live performance art, into photography, into painting. You know, there's no real boundaries, and a massive thing for me is the dispelling of boundaries, dissolving them. So it may not surprise you to hear, and I will fly my colours here, that I am utterly dismayed at the prospect of the UK leaving the European Union, because not only am I Northern Irish and I'm extremely worried about the border situation and the peace process, but I just feel like this is the biggest peace project that humanity has ever known, and it was moving towards, and not getting everything right, of course not, but it was moving towards a lack of borders and a more fluid approach to being in a different place. Because what we consider as a nation is really quite a new concept. It's a fairly recent concept. And so a lot of my work is actually where borders of all kinds are breaking down. My book is called Old Borders, New Technologies. It's about convergences between things and indistinctions between different media, between places, between different factions of society. All of these different things, they're all starting to mix and become indistinguishable. And you know, so that's kind of the backdrop, and it's of everything I'm doing at the moment. It's making me feel all the more stronger about fighting for these things and making these points, but also to fight for the worth of critical thinking, and to not just accept what you're told blindly, but to demand demonstrations of truth claims. So I have a kind of possibly an atheistic approach to things as well. It's I need to see evidence before I'll just believe something. I am in the process of, I've got plans to develop a website called Audiovisual Cultures, and I had planned to sort of, I suppose in drips and drabs, start this podcast. And I kind of did a sort of trial episode 1, but the sound quality is terrible because I had problems editing the recording, and mostly for my own incompetence, not the technology, but also I have issues with technology because I'm working from a very old laptop that is struggling quite a lot at the moment, and financially I'm a bit restricted, so I just can't sort of go out and buy a MacBook right now. So I have a Patreon account, and I am touting for money, please, and a PayPal, but I'll come back to those at the end. The idea for the website is to start loading it with teaching materials. What I'm doing with my teaching materials is I am fixing them up. I'm updating a lot of things, and I'm also, over the years when I was applying for jobs, when I had an interview for a lectureship, I would actually design a whole module, like say a specialist final year module that was research led, and so I have this archive of modules that never actually really existed but were things that I put together, as well as modules I did design and did actually teach in temporary teaching posts. And I'm kind of working my way through what I've already got, and a lot of that I'm not happy with, because as many of you may understand, if you're academics yourselves, a lot of it was thrown together on the hoof with about 5 minutes to go, because even though I was working about 80 hours a week at some points, and I'm not exaggerating, it still wasn't enough because the workload was so heavy in the earliest posts I had. And on top of that, I was trying to get a book out because I was desperately scrambling to get interviews for something a bit more permanent than 5 months here, 10 months there, that sort of thing. And so I'm fixing stuff up, and I'm working on some new stuff that I never got to teach that I feel really passionate about, because of course, like I said earlier, I have come from a really traditional film studies background. So what I mean by that is basically white men, the most privileged people in filmland that you you can think of, that was my film education. And very rarely were there any women filmmakers. Very, very rarely did I have access, and even when I did, they were usually white, but it was very few and far between. And it was usually only when I did the likes of modernism or the avant-garde, so out on the margins of production, was the only time I had real access to women in my film education. So I had to basically re-educate myself in film studies when I was teaching to redress these problems. And that as well is something I feel just hugely passionate about, is visibility. As wonderful and as easy as it is to teach with Hitchcock, he doesn't need any more exposure. He doesn't need any more books written about him. But there are so many incredible filmmakers of all kinds out there who are worthy. And I think teaching things like just basic, sort of introductory film analysis, teaching what different shot types there are and how they function and why they might be used. There's no reason why you can't use a film by anybody else other than a white guy. For that, there are so many ways to redress the balances, and that doesn't mean that anybody who already has privilege loses any of their privilege. In fact, it raises us all up if we are inclusive. And I'm learning all the time how to be better at being inclusive. So I hope that becomes apparent as we move forward. So the website was the main thing, and I'm thinking about moving towards a publication on this. A kind of guide to studying audiovisual cultures is something long term that I'd like to work on, because there are some seminal film studies textbooks out there, but I think it would be great to have something broader that is just more reflective of the fluidity between different media in the 21st century. I do feel like my unpreparedness shows how rambly and scruffy my mind actually is, because I think that what I usually produce is fairly polished compared to this. But this is the real me, and I think certainly for the introduction to the whole thing, which may or may not be coherent, and at this point it's regardless, it sort of doesn't matter, because no one may ever listen to this, but I hope somebody does at some point, because in earnest, I really feel strongly that this is something that can benefit us all, and I feel very powerless in this world. But if there is one thing I can do, it's edge into technology and muck in with stuff and be a voice. And the technologies that use here are becoming a little bit more democratic all the time, because yes, there's a certain privilege in being able to access them. I think probably in the Western world, I'm the sort of person who for a very long time felt like my voice was not valid. It's time that we take a bit of that back for ourselves. I mean, the whole mantra of take back control is something we can reclaim for ourselves. Any of us who have felt that we're not in control of anything, and we don't deserve to be, because that's the attitude we've been given. But I don't feel like that's true. And I mean, I'm saying that of myself, and I still feel like that's too arrogant of me. But I'm going to say it anyway, because I think unless somebody like me, who isn't the most privileged person in the world, but still has a lot more privilege than other people, because I am able-bodied and I am white and I am Anglophone and I live in the UK and I am technically not a poor person at the moment. I have a voice, and if I can use that voice to raise anybody else up and give them visibility and to give them a platform, and for me doing that is filmmakers and artists who are marginalised in some way, who are not the focus of attention, and I think should be, because I think every piece of culture is something that's up for discussion, and I don't think evaluations of quality are useful all the time. I think something that you could consider, a movie that's so bad it's funny, that has something to tell us about culture. I think that has something to tell us about who gets to make stuff. My plans basically are I want to, in time, this is where the money stuff comes in, because in time I want to develop a website to centralize and host all of these things. So to have a place where this podcast can be, and to have a place where a regular blog can be, and to start building up courses on things, and to generate some interest, to start planning a book project, maybe a series of textbooks on studying audiovisual cultures, to start showing how coherent a lot of things are, showing how fluid things are out there, but also how robust this kind of study can be. Because another concern of mine is that even sort of well into the 21st century now, film studies or media studies or television studies or any of these areas are largely, it feels, still considered to be soft subjects, and they're not taken seriously. And often this is the consideration of prospective students who, I don't want to make too many assumptions or generalizations here because that's not fair, but I have in my time come across many people who embody this, where somebody is being sent to university even though they're not necessarily university material, or they plain just don't want to go, and they have to do something, and these subjects are regarded as relatively easy, or they've decided they want to be the next Quentin Tarantino, so they decide to do film in some way, or they think because they're a film buff that they're going to be good at film studies, and that's not necessarily the case either. And as inclusive as I am trying to be in this, I will keep coming back to film studies because that is my training, and film aesthetics is my kind of main area, so there will be lapses of me going to that automatically. The thing is that parents and the students themselves often don't appreciate the complexities of this and the many different areas that film studies alone can encompass. But it's similar with any of the cognate subjects. You know, television studies encounters a lot of the same issues because you see, it's industrial, it's economic, it's political, it's social, it's cultural, it's historical, it's also philosophical. There's also huge swathes of these studies where you can look at them through another kind of theory. So cultural studies comes into it quite a bit. Feminism, gender, sexuality, queer studies, queer theory. There's just so many. I made a huge list for one of the YouTube videos I've done. I've made a huge list, and I think I've still left stuff off. There's so many areas of study, and a lot of them are really complex. And to have the most success is a really difficult word because I don't really think that's a term. But what I mean is that to be the most effective at being a scholar in the area is to be able to understand and articulate quite a complex network of contexts through which to read a piece of work. I mean, I think even for close textual analysis, that is the case. And I think anybody who assumes otherwise is really very much mistaken, and it does us all a disservice, and I don't think we should allow it. I get really fed up when what I do isn't considered, a sort of proper subject, or I'm not considered to have a proper PhD because of what it's in, because it's really very complex, and the world we live in at the moment, certainly for those of us in the West, our lives are embedded, they are underpinned by, they are driven in many cases by screen cultures in many ways. We live in a mediatized culture. You have to be able to understand the media. You have to be able to understand that specific language to keep yourself right in the world. A lot of the times to be able to question stuff, to be able to just not accept absolutely everything you hear. And that's just so important at the moment. So the aim of this podcast is really to try and get some regular output. It's going to be different. I will aim to drop something every week. I'll try to make it on the same day every week, and some weeks there will be weeks when I'll really do an audio version of one of the videos that I've produced for YouTube, and a lot of these are research papers of mine. I'm going to start doing some of my lecture material as well, and I also have a series on YouTube about academic practice in which, I kind of talk through the basics of critical thinking and essay writing skills, exam preparation, how to prepare for presentations that are assessed, and going into a bit more depth. There's going to be ones on a lot of the different things you need for preparation for larger independent projects like dissertations that are a bit more involved, but also I'll probably do some on PhD proposals and Survivor as well. That's an accumulating series, so I'll probably do audio versions of all of these things. It's not necessarily going to have a kind of set format every week, which might be unusual. There'd be weeks that'll be more of interest to some than others, but I hope that it will be varied enough that it'll be useful for everybody and there'll be something for everybody, I hope. Also, importantly, I think it's important to say that I really want to hear from everybody. If you're out there, if you're hearing this, if there's some way that we can get together or try and do this over Skype, we can have a conversation about something of your choice. If you're working on a PhD at the moment, or if you're writing a book, or if there's a particular issue that you want to talk about, such as disabled access in the university space, or what it's like to be a person of colour in academia, wherever you are, mental health issues, that's something that's very close to my heart. What it's like to be working class and economically underprivileged when you do postgraduate studies, and how you reconcile your financial situation and your need to work with your overbearing desire to be, to exercise your mind, to get qualifications and to go for a career that wouldn't traditionally have been an option for somebody like you. Any of those kinds of issues at all. I suppose any pedagogical issues as well. Basically anything you think that should be heard and you would like to be heard. And if you're thinking that people like you are underrepresented, well, this is a call out for anybody who feels like that to put yourself forward, to use this tiny platform that I have. Help me expand it. Help me make it something bigger than just me. Be involved, and you'll reach out and tell people the issues that they need to know about. Because I think it's only when we raise each other up that everybody benefits. If this can help even in a small way. I don't know if this will ever go anywhere. I don't know if anyone will ever listen to me rambling on about stuff. And there are weeks, as I say, where it'll be fairly structured and I'll be reading something that I've scripted, so it'll be smoother than me just rambling. It would be nice for other voices to be heard. I really hope that you'll consider it. It's an open invitation. At the moment, I'll just use my personal email to get in touch. I am gonna make a point of making one for the series, but I haven't done it just yet, so I won't give you what I want that to be in case I can't use it and some stranger gets your stuff. So you can email me on basically all of my handles on all of the social media things is P Blair, and if you know me, you'll know what that is. And I use that for my email address as well. It's PEA, as in the vegetable, BLAIR, and no, I am not Tony's daughter. And that joke, of course, never gets old for me. It's actually refreshing when I get referred to as the Blair Witch. Anyway, PEABLAIR, P Blair is my handle for everything. So if you use that, PEABlair@gmail.com for now, and I will make up an email address for Audiovisual Cultures. So if you would like to chat with me and have the option of being on this podcast that might be heard by hopefully one or two people, then please get in touch, because it's out there, it puts it out there, it puts the issues out there, and it's, I hope, a safe space that you can say what you need to say, and I'm always happy to learn. And even if you're working on something at the minute and you're trying to talk, you want to talk it through and you want to use it as an opportunity to do that, that's just sort of Skype for an hour and see where it goes. So I'm on Twitter on the same thing, so if you prefer to contact me over that, that's fine. it's my Facebook, but I don't really use Facebook all that often. I have actively become bad at Facebook because it really annoys me. So the email, the Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn as that as well. I'm on Patreon, as I say. So importantly, if anybody out there has a few quid to spare and you think you would like to sort of support something that might be useful and might keep somebody like me alive for a bit as well, if that sounds like a desirable thing you would like to do and you can comfortably afford it, then I have a Patreon page. So you can find me under that handle there, PeaBlair on Patreon, and I've been posting links there for a while now from blog posts and other audio recordings I've made in the past that aren't very good quality, and but videos I've been making as well, so all the YouTube videos on Patreon as well. It's all in US dollars. And I have it set for monthly amounts because I'm working on lots of stuff all the time. And I think with the podcast, that will be a way of me having a regular weekly output, because the videos, I put them up as I make them, and sometimes there could be a month's gap. The likes of the Christmas break scuppered me because I went away and I did no work for 2 weeks, and it was bliss. I haven't done that for such a long time, so there was a full month basically where I had made a video and put it up, sort of a week before I went away. But then when I came back from holiday, it took a couple of weeks to get the first thing ready, so there was about a month's gap between things on it, and so that's going to happen. And I want to stress it, sort of just because there's sort of nothing coming up on it, I am working on stuff. It's taking me a while because I'm working with really old clunky equipment. I have a computer that shuts itself down every 5 minutes. It's not connecting to the internet very well. I have there's issues that I'm sort of coming up against, and any money is really helpful. Anything at all is really appreciated. You can choose whatever amount you want, so it sort of just depends on your own circumstances and how much you think any of this is worth. But it's also a future investment because I really want to have a go with this website. I have book projects that I'm trying to work on as well. I'm putting a lot of energy into these kind of online outputs because I'm trying to generate a profile, and I'm trying to get work out there so that people can see what I'm doing and would hopefully consider supporting it, so that I can then start writing these other things and try and get some sort of income stream. So it would all be a massive help. I have set it so that patrons pledging any amount at all will get access to the transcripts I produce of the videos that I make, because I write a script for myself to read, because as you've been able to hear in this raw, unplanned ramble I've just done, I am really rambly and I will not stick to the point, so I have to write myself a script. So I've written that anyway, and I've been putting a lot of work into making them really clear and readable, but I also embed them with links to further information, and if I have cited any texts or mentioned any films, I give full bibliographical references for those as well. So I produce these transcripts in PDF form. They are accessible to anybody who gives me any money at all on Patreon. And also, if you want to just make like a one-off donation, then I've got a paypal.me set up. So it's /PEA Blair. It's everything's the same. And so you can donate one-off payments via PayPal. I think that's just set up for sterling, but I don't know if you can, if you want to do it in another currency, that might be fine. I think it's set up for sterling. And I cannot thank anybody enough if you do that. So to sum up, I'm trying to produce accessible study aids for anybody who's interested in audiovisual cultures and finding out more about those. So if you're a student, if you're at school, if you're anybody out there at all who understands English and who wants to learn a bit more about this area, then it's for you. and it's about having another go at it, because we've had a conventional way of doing things that has certain privileges about it, and I kind of want to start doing something a bit different and taking conventions and doing them in a different way. I'm really excited about the possibilities of that and where that could go, and I really hope you join me for it. So thank you so much for listening. Just to remind you, it's peablair@gmail.com until I get a dedicated email address for Audiovisual Cultures if you would like to record one of these with me. I really hope to hear from you soon, and thank you so much for listening and for any support at all that you can give. Even just sharing the stuff online is a massive help. Take care of yourselves. I hope to see you soon.